this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Lowe's knows Sundays are for football, so tackle your home improvement projects by Saturday and earn your Sunday with great deals on LG and Bosch appliances, select Bounty and Swiffer cleaning products, and more. Then once your to-do list is done, get ready to kick back, relax, and enjoy the game. Shop in store or online now and earn your Sunday with help from Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
If you've been sitting on a business idea for a while, consider this your sign to do something with it. You can even make it official today by creating a website with Wix Harmony. Just tell Wix Harmony what you want, and it'll create the whole website for you, business features included. But don't worry, you can still change anything by hand. It's your website, your call. Try it at wix.com/harmony. That's wix.com/harmony.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
June seems like a month where there's not a lot going on with my job as a fantasy analyst, but it's actually one of the busiest months of my year because I'm working on the draft guide, and that draft guide has a ton of research in it each year that takes a lot of time. So to manage that time as well as I can, you may be getting more of these rewind episodes over the next few weeks. For the early week episodes, there's still becoming a best ball bro, there's still the late round show, and there's still perspectives in the mailbag happening each week. You won't be suffering from lack of content, I promise you that. But I do need to be smart about how I'm spending my time at this moment. With that being said, this rewind episode is an important one. And the topic, it's one that I'm once again featuring in this year's draft guide. It's all about touchdown rate at quarterback. What it is, why it's important, and how we can use it to our advantage in our drafts. Last year's big touchdown rate poster boys were Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, and Joe Burrow. Goff did see the dip in touchdown rate that we expected, though it was still pretty high. He also saw his points per game drop by over 2 points per contest year over year. Baker Mayfield saw a major decline. Even if that was partially due to injury, regression hit him in a big way. Now, Joe Burrow didn't really have a huge sample, but for what it's worth, in his 7 relevant fantasy outings last year, he saw 16 points per contest. There's obviously more going on there, though. But when it came to touchdown rate regression last year, the results were more or less right in line with what this rewind episode talked about. And while there aren't as many obvious candidates this year, the one that sticks out most is probably Matthew Stafford, something I talked about on last week's mailbag episode. We'll see where his ADP officially lands, especially in more home leagues. But that's going to be the quarterback to track this summer. Regardless, though, if you want some of the data, you want some of this information on touchdown rate, give this one a listen. Before you do that, though, just make sure you're checking out the brand new lateround.com and you're pre-ordering that draft guide. I really try to make that draft guide bigger and better each year, and I plan on doing the same thing here in 2026. That's lateround.com. But without further ado, here's the rewind episode on touchdown rate. Things are a lot different these days, as I've talked about plenty of times in the podcast. But one thing has remained the same. Touchdowns are still volatile. You've heard me talk about this before when speaking on the pocket passer trap. The crux of that idea is that generally speaking, when you get quarterbacks who don't run the ball a lot, and when they have early round average draft positions, they bust at a super high rate. You're better off getting a mobile quarterback in high-end QB2 range than you are an immobile quarterback at like QB5, historically. The main reason for that is because pocket passing quarterbacks, the ones who don't give you a lot of fantasy production with their rushing, pocket passers rely more heavily on passing touchdowns to boost their fantasy scores. That shouldn't be some shocking revelation. If a quarterback is running the ball a lot, it means he doesn't have to post as good of passing numbers to match some of the production from a pocket passer. But for a pocket passer, those passing numbers are all he's got. He can't fall back on rushing. So if the passing numbers aren't there, then good luck in fantasy football. And relying on passing production, it's kind of scary. At quarterback, the single thing that's going to correlate to success most in fantasy football is passing touchdowns. And unfortunately, passing touchdowns come with a whole lot of variance. Now, don't get me wrong, better quarterbacks will generally throw for more touchdowns than bad quarterbacks will. But we know crazy and annoying things can happen in the touchdown column. A quarterback might throw an 80-yard bomb down to the 1 just to see his running back run it in on the following play. For that 80-yard completion, the quarterback is getting just 3.2 points in a league that gives out 1 point per 25 yards. Meanwhile, a quarterback might have a running back gain 80 yards in a long run before going down on the 1. And then the following play, if that team runs play action and scores on a pass, the quarterback gets 4 points. Technically more than 4 because he passed for a yard as well. That 1-yard play is a whole lot more valuable than the 80-yard play. And yeah, that's kind of annoying. It's kind of dumb. But that's how it goes in fantasy football. And that's a very basic example showing how touchdowns can sometimes be fluky. Like, we're going to see a general correlation of yards to touchdowns. We're going to see general correlation of strong talents giving us strong touchdown totals. But outlier type seasons happen at quarterback. And those outlier seasons are largely driven by touchdown variance. Let's walk through a general example of this. Touchdown rate is the easiest statistic to talk about when it comes to touchdown regression at quarterback. Because touchdown rate is simply touchdowns divided by pass attempts. It's really easy to grasp. For anyone who read last week's newsletter blast, you saw this stat that I'm about to throw at you. Since 2011, we've had 57 quarterbacks hit 300 pass attempts to go along with a touchdown rate of 6% or higher. The league average during this time, by the way, is a touchdown rate of 4.4%. So the ordinary quarterback will throw a touchdown pass on 4.4% of their attempts. But in this sample of 57, they threw a touchdown pass on at least 6% of theirs. So significantly higher. Meanwhile, of those 57, 44 of them ended up throwing it 300 or more times the following season as well. So after that 6% touchdown share season. Guess how many of those 44 quarterbacks saw their touchdown rates increase year over year? 4 of them. And 2 of those 4 were Russell Wilson, who had touchdown rates of 6% and 6.1%, meaning he barely even made the cutoff here to begin with. Now, 6% is an arbitrary number for sure, but it's one that we'll probably see players hit each season, and it's one that's shown serious regression in the past. One question I asked myself, though, when I was writing that newsletter and when I was digging into touchdown rate, one question I kept asking was, does the market generally account for this regression? And does it actually matter for fantasy football? Like, I can point to all these quarterbacks who are going to probably regress in some way year over year, just by looking at touchdown rate. But is the market already accounting for that? In other words, Jared Goff going from 2024 to 2025. Goff had a touchdown rate last year of 6.9%. He's now being drafted around QB 10, depending on the source. Is his regression already baked in? What's happened historically with quarterbacks who had high touchdown rates? Do they live up to expectation the following year? Let's answer those questions. I went back to that sample of 57 quarterbacks who hit a 6% or better touchdown rate since 2011. Now, obviously, if we're going to analyze next season data, we have to remove all the players who hit that mark in 2024. I also want to do some average draft position comparisons. And my ADP database is built off of data from fantasydata.com. And that ADP goes back to 2014. So I'm really looking at 2014 through 2023 here. And I'm looking at quarterbacks who had 300 pass attempts and a 6% or better touchdown rate in year N, along with 300 or more pass attempts in year N plus 1, the following year. So 1 year, 300 pass attempts, at least a 6% touchdown rate. The following year, at least 300 pass attempts. That left me with 37 quarterbacks to analyze in total. For some context, of these 37, only 3 of them improved their touchdown rate from year N to year N plus 1. So the vast majority of these dudes saw a decline in touchdown rate from 1 year to the next. But what about fantasy production? Well, of our 37 quarterbacks who had touchdown rates of 6% or better during their follow-up season, just 6 of them saw improvement in fantasy points per game. And for the record, I'm using standard scoring here, so 4 points per touchdown pass. But that means that roughly 84% of quarterbacks who had a touchdown rate of 6% or better in one season ended up seeing a lower points per game rate the following year. That's kind of staggering, but it's also not totally surprising when you figure how much touchdown rate is going to drive fantasy production in the first place. So if it's a volatile number that regresses, fantasy points will regress too. And also, of those 6 quarterbacks who saw improvement in points per game, one of them actually did see a decrease in passing points per game. That was Russell Wilson from 2013 to 2014. The only reason he improved in points per game is because he went from 1 rushing touchdown during his good touchdown rate season to 6 rushing touchdowns the following year. Regardless, we're looking at 84% of quarterbacks seeing a drop in production from one year to the next. And that drop in production is not insignificant. Let me give you the breakdown. Of the 31 quarterbacks who saw a drop in points per game from one year to the next, 2 of them had a drop in points per game of 0 to 1 points. So not a huge drop. 3 of them had a drop between 1 and 2 points. So again, not a significant drop. 5 more of them had a drop between 2 and 3 points. And then 21 of them saw a drop in production of 3 or more points per game. So yeah, 84% of high touchdown rate quarterbacks see a drop in points per game from one year to the next. But 57% of them, well more than half of them, see a drop of more than 3 points per game. And here's the kicker. If you sort this list of 37 quarterbacks by their year-over-year drop in points per game, another interesting trend emerges. The players who fall the most are generally pocket passers. They generally aren't giving you a little extra with their legs. Here's an example. Within our sample, there are some repeat performers. Lamar Jackson's been over the 6% touchdown share mark twice within the sample. Josh Allen, same deal. Russell Wilson has many of them, and so on. So there's a mix of players in here, a mix between mobile quarterbacks and more immobile pocket passer quarterbacks. Well, remember how I said 6 of the 37 quarterbacks who had 6% or better touchdown rates ended up improving their points per game scores year over year? 4 of those 6 players scored at least 3.2 points per game in that following season with their legs. When you sort this sample of 37 quarterbacks by rushing fantasy points per game, when you look at the top 10 quarterbacks by rushing points per game, 4 of them actually improved their points per game year over year. To put that another way, it plays into what I was saying at the top, what I've said about the pocket passer trap, what Rich Rebar wrote about over a decade ago when he created the idea of the Konami code at quarterback. When these quarterbacks are giving you some sort of rushing production, they're giving you other outs. So yeah, the passing regression is going to hit. But oftentimes, when the quarterback is mobile, they can still maintain fantasy value because of what they can do on the ground. We need to be careful of all quarterbacks who have unsustainable touchdown rates. But we need to be extra careful with pocket passing quarterbacks who have unsustainable touchdown rates. Now, one of the big questions that I was asking is, does the market actually account for all of this? We now know, and it's pretty glaring too, that a quarterback with a high touchdown rate one year has a high chance of scoring fewer fantasy points the following season, especially if he's not that much of a rusher. But does the market account for this already? Well, I took a look at average draft position data, and here's what I found. First off, I think we need to be aware that the quarterbacks that we're dealing with here are all generally good quarterbacks. Touchdown rates are volatile and they regress, yes, but you'll still generally see good quarterbacks with slightly higher touchdown rates than the norm. You're not going to get like Aiden O'Connell throwing to a 7% touchdown rate in a given season. Now, we did have guys like Tua get there, Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, some weird players like that. But the list of 37 is more filled with names like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, Joe Burrow, and Tom Brady. But because these quarterbacks are more good than bad, to go along with them coming off really good seasons, they're naturally going to have higher ADPs the following year. The average quarterback rank by ADP among this group during their N+1 season was 6.8, meaning these quarterbacks were basically drafted at QB7 on average the following season. Only 4 of them were drafted outside QB12 range. Now, I just want to give you guys that context because this first exercise plays into that. The first thing I did was simply look at average draft position rank that a quarterback had versus where that quarterback finished in that given year. So Peyton Manning in 2014, after his 2013 season that saw him with an 8.4% touchdown rate. So he was above that 6% mark. In 2014, he was the QB1 by ADP. Obviously, that's going to be impossible to improve upon, but he finishes the QB4. But to give you an idea of how these touchdown rate regression candidates did in that N+1 season, 28 of the 37 failed to live up to their positional rank by ADP. So if a quarterback was ranked QB7 by ADP and he finished as QB11, he didn't live up to his average draft positional rank. 28 of the 37 failed to do that, which obviously is not what we're looking for. Now, late round draft guide readers know this already, but I like to look at this kind of stuff a little bit more precisely. I like to compare average draft position to player output. And the way I do that is by looking at history, plotting every quarterback spot by ADP since 2014 and comparing that spot to the quarterback's points per game output. Using a trend line, that gives me ADP expectation, or how many points per game we'd expect a quarterback to score at a particular overall ADP. I can then take that number and compare it to a quarterback's actual output. And we can see if the quarterback outperformed ADP or not. Unsurprisingly, this group of 37 quarterbacks underperformed versus expectation more than they overperformed. 24 of them played under expected, which honestly, it's not as bad of a number, all things considered. I thought it was going to be worse than that. And it tells me that the market is doing something to adjust for the incoming regression for these guys. But I will say, not many of the quarterbacks have outperformed average draft position expectation by a large number of points. And on average, quarterbacks who are part of this cohort are falling about a point per game below ADP expectation. So just in general, these quarterbacks generally play 1 point per game below expected. That might not seem like a lot, but it is a lot across a larger sample. So when you look at where these high touchdown rate quarterbacks are being drafted the following season, they far more often than not fail to live up to average draft position expectation too. So what does this all mean? Well, to wrap up everything I just said, we've got the following takeaways. Number one, when a quarterback has a touchdown rate of 6% or better one season, odds are that he's going to see worse fantasy production the following season. And there's a better than 50% chance that he sees a drop of 3 or more points per game. Number two, that can be combated a little bit by quarterbacks who are mobile. They tend to beat regression more in points per game because they have another way of scoring points to fall back on. Now, obviously 3 points per game, it's a lot easier to lose from a player who scores 25 points per game one year versus one who scores 20. So if you just want to look at how the market predicts this stuff, it's still not great. Only 35% of high touchdown rate quarterbacks will exceed ADP expectation the following year, or they have in the past. And the vast majority of those players, they're not doing it by a significant number of points. And for the record, this applies much more to season long than best ball. Best ball is about spike tweaks. It's about stacking. That can shift a player's cost. It also makes certain players more or less valuable based on your team build. But for season long, it's a different story. It's very clear that touchdown rate is volatile, but we know that it's volatile. So let's use that to our advantage. Let's use that regression, and instead of thinking that it's unpredictable, think that touchdown rate is actually predictable because we know it's going to regress.
T-Mobile has the best plan on the best network. Just ask Kevin Bacon.
Today, business happens virtually everywhere. That's why you need Supermobile from T-Mobile. The best plan on the best network, letting you run your business from your phone like never before. In moments of high demand, T-Mobile's network adapts to put your business connection first.
Discover more at supermobile.com.
Best business plan based on combination of advanced network performance, coverage layers, and security features. Best network based on analysis by Ookla Speed Test Intelligence Data 1H 2025. Ookla trademarks used under license and reprinted with permission.
This is Tab Ramos from Inside American Soccer. And this summer, Topgolf is turning into the ultimate soccer destination. They've got a new soccer-themed game you can play with your group, exclusive food and drink items. They've even installed full-size soccer goals so you can try to hit golf balls right into the net. And every match all summer long will be on throughout the venue. And if you want to keep the fun going all summer, you can get the Topgolf Summer Fun Pass, which lets you play every single day and bring up to 5 guests every visit. Get yours now at topgolf.com/funpass.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.